Okay, let's unpack this. We all know how it feels, right? Just buried under information.
Absolutely. Reports, headlines, analysis everywhere. It piles up.
Exactly. And our mission here, always, is to try and cut through that noise. We want to zero in on, the really important knowledge, maybe some surprising insights from the sources we look at. And today, we're taking a deep dive into something pretty critical and complex.
Yeah.
The air defense capabilities of India and Pakistan.
And this dive, it's not just a general overview. It's actually guided by a specific, detailed analysis and issue brief.
Right.
This brief looks at the systems, what they're supposed to do, their capabilities, and really importantly, how they actually perform during a very recent and significant military clash.
Okay. So for you listening and for us guiding you through this source material, the goal is pretty clear. We want to understand the layers, the complexities of these air defense systems.
Get a handle on their strengths, weaknesses.
As presented in this analysis, yeah. And see what this real-world test case, this confrontation, revealed about, how effective they are, maybe where things are heading.
And just to be clear, this isn't about us endorsing viewpoints or picking sides.
No, not at all. Strictly about understanding the tech, the strategy, and what the source itself found.
And some of the insights that come out of this analysis, especially about that real-world test, they're quite revealing.
Okay, so where do we start? Setting the stage.
Yeah, let's do that. The source makes it really clear why air defense is just so fundamental these days, in modern conflict, I mean.
That's the shield, right?
Exactly. It protects everything. Crucial sites, mobile platforms, weapons, troops, even civilian areas from anything coming through the air. It's way beyond just old school aircraft interception now.
Right. And the specific event that this analysis uses as its sort of crucible, its testing ground, is Operation Sindoor. Happened May 6th and 7th, 2025. And the source says this was India's response to an earlier attack in Pahalgam back on April 22nd.
And the brief, it characterizes this whole confrontation primarily as an air defense war between the two countries.
So it really put these systems under pressure.
The ultimate test, you could say. So based on this analysis, maybe we should start by looking at India's air defense system first.
Sounds good. The source describes it as distinctly multi-tiered.
Yes, multi-layered. It's a mix, some imported tech, some system developed jointly with other countries, and some homegrown indigenous capabilities, built in layers.
It really is. And one of the key layers the source focuses on is India's ballistic missile defense, the BMD program.
Right.
What's interesting, and the brief points this out, is that its origins go way back to '95. That was after Pakistan got those M11 missiles.
And it really picked up steam after Pakistan's nuclear tests in '98 and the Kargil War in '99. That context is important, according to the source.
Definitely. The analysis highlights this phased development for the BMD. Phase I finished by April 2019. That was about intercepting missiles inside the atmosphere, endo-atmospheric.
Exactly, ender-atmospheric defense. And the strategic insight there, the source says, is that Phase I was specifically designed to counter Pakistan's existing missile threats, the ones with ranges up to about 2,000 kilometers.
Okay. And Phase II, that's underway now.
Yes, Phase II is ongoing. That's for defense outside the atmosphere, exo-atmospheric interception. The analysis points to this being aimed at potential threats like, longer-range Chinese missiles up to maybe 5,000 kilometers.
Or a much bigger challenge.
For sure.
And Phase I had specific interceptors, didn't it? The source mentions the Prithvi Air Defense, PE. High-altitude stuff.
Right. PAD for high-altitude interception, up to 80 kilometers, speeds up to Mach 5. Its role, as described, is tackling those 2,000-kilometer range threats.
And then there was the AAD, Advanced Air Defense.
Yeah, AAD for lower altitudes up to 30 kilometers. The analysis notes both were tested successfully quite a while back, 2006, and they've been strategically placed around key cities, important installations.
Okay. And for Phase II, the exo-atmospheric part?
The source points to the Prithvi Defense Vehicle, or PDV. Tested in 2017. That aims for interception way up, maybe 100-kilometer altitude. It shows that push, for defense against more sophisticated, longer-range threats. That's the analysis, anyway.
Got it. Okay, so moving beyond just ballistic missiles, threats like aircraft, cruise missiles, India also has significant long-range capabilities, right? Covering up to 400 kilometers.
Oh, yeah. The headline system there, and the source really emphasizes this, is the Russian S-400 Triumph.
That was a big purchase.
Huge. 5 systems, $5.4 billion back in 2016. A major investment.
And what makes it so significant, according to the analysis?
Well, the S-400 is detailed as providing this really powerful layered defense. It uses 4 different missile types.
4 types.
Yeah, with ranges varying from, say, 40 kilometers all the way out to that maximum 400 kilometers. But the insight isn't just the range. It's the ability, as the source describes it, to engage all sorts of targets.
Like what?
Aircraft, UAVs, even ballistic and cruise missiles, up to 30-kilometer altitude. And it can apparently track and engage up to 36 targets at the same time.
Wow, 36 simultaneously.
Yeah. And the analysis notes it's quick to deploy, maybe 5 minutes, and it can integrate across India's different military services. Army, Navy, Air Force.
And India's actually been getting these delivered.
Steadily. The source states 3 of the 5 regiments have arrived since 2021. The last 2 are expected by late 2026.
And they've given it an Indian name, too.
They have S-400 Sudarshan Chakra.
Okay, so below that S-400 layer, what's next? Medium range. Up to 100 kilometers.
Exactly. Centered around the Barak 8 system. And this one's interesting. It's a joint development. India's DRDO and Israel Aerospace Industries working together.
An India-Israel collaboration.
Right. And it comes in different versions, as the brief explains. There's a naval version, LRSAM long-range surface-to-air missile with up to 100 kilometers range.
Okay.
And then there's the MRSAM medium-range SAM with a range up to 70 kilometers. And this MRSAM, it's been inducted across the Army, Navy, and Air Force.
Versatile system, then.
Seems so. The source mentions its final tests happened just before Operation Sindoor, actually, April 4th, 2025. It highlights its role in providing defense for specific points or wider areas against a whole range of airborne threats.
Okay, so S-400, then Barak 8. What about shorter ranges, say up to 35 kilometers?
Right, short-range systems. A key indigenous system here is the Akash.
Developed in India by DRDO.
Correct. Inducted back in 2015. The analysis describes it as a mobile SAM. Range is about 30-35 kilometers, can engage targets up to 18 kilometers altitude, and it's capable of autonomous operation engaging multiple targets.
And there's a newer version in the works.
Yes, the source mentions Akash Next Generation, or Akash NG. The aim is to push that range out maybe up to 70 kilometers. Tests were noted in 2021 and 2024.
India also uses Israeli systems in this category too, right? The Spy-DR.
That's right, the Spy-DR system, designed for low-level threats, quick reaction defense. It uses Python 5 and Derby missiles.
Does it come in different versions?
It does. There's the Spider SR, short range, about 15-kilometer range, 360-degree engagement. And the Spider MMR, medium range, extending out to 35 kilometers with a more advanced radar.
And India bought these.
Yeah, the analysis notes India purchased 18 Spider MLR systems back in 2009, and it mentions its use shooting down a Pakistani surveillance drone after the 2019 Balakot airstrike.
Ah, okay. So that gives, as the source puts it, a glimpse of its real-world application.
Exactly. The brief also acknowledges India still operates some older Soviet-era systems like the Pechora and is also developing something called QRSAM, a quick reaction surface-to-air missile system for ranges up to maybe 25-30 kilometers.
Okay, so that covers short range. What about really close-in defense? Very short range.
All right, up to maybe 10 kilometers via SHORADs, very short-range air defense systems. The source notes their main job is protecting ground forces vehicles.
But also useful against drones now, I guess.
Increasingly important against UAVs, yeah, the source highlights that. This layer includes some legacy Soviet and Russian systems like Tunguska, Shilka, and also MANPADS.
Man-portable air defense systems, like Stingers or Iglis.
Exactly. India's been getting modern ones like the Russian Igla-M and Igla-S. The source says a new batch arrived in April 2024. And DRDO, India's Defense Research Agency, is also working on an indigenous VSA SHORAD system.
Okay, that's a lot of different systems, different layers.
It is.
Lovely.
And the crucial insight from the source here is that none of this works properly without monitoring and coordination. You need that composite air picture.
Right, tying it all together.
Exactly. The analysis really emphasizes the importance of India's network for doing this.
How does that network work?
Well, the Ballistic Missile Defense Network's Mission Control Center, the MCC, plays a big part. It monitors airspace with these powerful long-range tracking radars, LRTRs.
Like the Israeli green pine.
Yes, and the Indian-built Swordfish radars. Initial reported ranges were over 500 kilometers, but there are reports, mentioned in the source, of extensions up to 1,500 kilometers.
Wow, that's seeing things very far out.
That's the idea. The insight is that ability to track potential threats from extremely long distances.
And where else does the early warning data come from?
Various sources, as the analysis describes. The Indian Air Force itself, the National Technical Research Organization, NTRO, has systems like the ELM 2090 Terra, and importantly, the IAF's AEW&C aircraft.
Airborne early warning and control. The eyes in the sky.
Precisely. India operates the indigenous Nutra system. The source calls it a force multiplier. It's got 240-degree radar coverage, about 200-kilometer range.
And they also have Israeli systems.
Yes, the Falcon AWACS systems mounted on IL-76 aircraft. Those provide 360-degree coverage with a range over 400 kilometers. They give that really wide-area surveillance picture.
So all this sensor data, radars,
Yeah.
AWACS, CCSS, it has to feed into something, command and control.
Absolutely. The IAF has its Integrated Air Command and Control System, IACCS. The source describes this as the automated nerve center for managing air operations.
Okay.
It has 9 nodes covering the country, integrates data from various radars, AWACS, builds that composite air picture for the people controlling the weapons.
And the Army has its own system, too.
Yes, the Indian Army has Akash tier, developed by BEL. The analysis mentions a big contract for it, around INR 2,000 crore.
What does Akash Tier do?
It integrates radar and communication data for the Army's air defense units, automates their operations, gives them real-time airspace monitoring, mostly from vehicle-based platforms.
So 2 separate systems, IACCS for the Air Force, Akash Tier for the Army.
Well, yes, but the source highlights something important here. The ongoing effort to integrate the Army's Akash tier with the Air Force's central IACCS network.
Connecting them up.
Exactly. As of January 2025, the report says one site had achieved this integration. The insight, according to the analysis, is the strategic push towards a more unified, nationwide air defense command structure.
Okay, that paints a pretty detailed picture of India's layered approach based on the source material. Shall we turn to Pakistan's system now?
Let's do that. The analysis describes Pakistan's capability also as multi-layered, but specifically notes it's nascent relative to India, especially, it seems, as demonstrated in Operation Sindoor.
So still developing, comparatively.
That's the assessment in the brief, and the composition is different, too. The source notes it's primarily built on Chinese systems.
Mostly Chinese origin.
Primarily, yeah. With some Western systems mixed in, and they do have a growing domestic defense industry trying to contribute.
And their historical approach was different, too.
According to the brief, yes. More focused on defending specific bases, point defense, rather than broad territorial air defense. That wider job was largely left to their fighter aircraft.
Interesting. And the analysis makes a key point about investment priorities before this recent conflict.
It does. It suggests that prior to Operation Sindoor, Pakistan, facing trade-offs in spending, seems to have prioritized investment more towards offensive platforms.
Like drones and rockets.
Exactly. Over
Yeah.
defensive systems like air defense and ballistic missile defense.
Why was that, according to the source?
The source suggests a few reasons. Other investment priorities, maybe aircraft or submarines.
Yeah.
The high cost of modern air defense systems. And also difficulties accessing certain suppliers.
Like restrictions on Russian or American systems.
Yeah, those being hard to get and European systems often being very expensive. That's the context the brief provides for why their air defense might have lagged.
So the prediction is that this recent conflict, Operation Sindoor, will change things.
Very likely, the source predicts, it's expected to be a major catalyst driving Pakistan to invest much more heavily in air defense.
Probably with help from.
Likely increase in cooperation with China, definitely. Turkey is mentioned as a potential partner too, and maybe even some European countries could get involved.
Okay. So looking at the Pakistan Army systems specifically, what does the analysis list?
It lists older China origin SA-2s, some French Crotel systems for ground platforms, and different versions of their Anza manpads.
Yeah, Yanzas. Those are Pakistani Chinese.
Yeah, derivatives of systems like the old Soviet SA-7 or the Chinese QW-1 and QW-2, which itself is related to the IGLA. The brief points out differences in their infrared seeker tech, suggesting, varying levels of sophistication across the Anza versions.
What else does the Army operate?
They also have the FM-90. That's a short-range system from China. It's actually a derivative of the French Crotel via the Chinese HQ-7 copy.
Okay.
The source notes the FM-90 is mounted on vehicles, range up to about 15 kilometers.
Any medium-range systems for the Army?
Yes, a significant one acquired in the 2010s is the HQ-16A, also known as the LY-80. That's a Chinese medium-range SAM system.
What's that based on?
The analysis describes it as being related to the Russian Buk system. It's effective in all weather, range around 40 kilometers. According to the source, this LY-80 helps bridge a gap in their ground-based air defense ranges.
Right.
And the source mentions that all these Pakistan Army AD systems, the LY-80, FM-90, and it briefly mentions an HQ-9P long-range system, though without much detail in this brief, they're all organized under what the PA calls its Comprehensive Layered Integrated Air Defense, CLIADE.
CLIA.
Yeah.
Okay, what about the Pakistan Air Force, the PAF?
Well, they created an air defense command way back in 1975, and they operate French Mistral VSORAD systems, very short range.
Okay.
But, and this is flagged as a critical finding by the source, there's a real lack of clarity and likely a significant absence of full integration between the PAF systems and the Pakistan Army's air defense systems.
They don't talk to each other properly.
That seems to be the implication in the analysis, a lack of seamless connection and coordination.
And this links back to Operation Sindoor.
Directly. The source suggests that anecdotal evidence and preliminary assessments from that conflict, particularly the fact that India apparently successfully penetrated and struck 11 different PAF air bases.
11 bases.
That's what the source reports. Damaging radar, weapon storage, runways. The analysis suggests the success partially confirms that suspected lack of integration within Pakistan's overall air defense network.
That sounds like a major vulnerability exposed.
That's certainly how the analysis presents it.
Okay. What about the Pakistan Navy? Do they have air defense?
They aspire to a multi-layered capability, the source says. The analysis discusses the likely integration of the LY-80N, that's the naval version of the HQ-16 SAM.
The one the Army uses.
Right, the naval variant. It's expected to be on their 4 Chinese-built Type 054 AP frigates.
Do we know the range of the naval version?
The source notes some uncertainty there. It could be the 40-kilometer range variant, or maybe a 70-kilometer one. It's not specified definitively.
And does the analysis point out any weaknesses there?
It does. It suggests the multi-target engagement capabilities seem confined just to the ship's own radars. Meaning they could potentially be overwhelmed by saturation attacks, too many threats coming in at once for the ship's systems to handle alone.
Okay.
The analysis suggests that post-Operation Sindoor, the Pakistan Navy will probably be looking hard at addressing these kinds of deficiencies.
Makes sense. So bringing this all together then, the source really views Operation Sindoor as this crucial real-world test, particularly for the Chinese systems Pakistan uses.
Exactly, a testing ground.
And the key finding from that test, according to the source.
Well, here's where the analysis delivers a pretty stark assessment. It reports their poor performance during the conflict.
Poor performance. Well, okay. That has big implications, I imagine.
Significant implications, according to the source. For Pakistan, it obviously provides a really strong reason and impetus to significantly boost investment in air defense.
And probably speed up their own indigenous development efforts, too.
Yes. Accelerate indigenous efforts across all 3 services: Army, Navy, Air Force.
And for China, the supplier of many of these systems.
For China, the source suggests it means they'll likely need to improve the performance of the systems they export. And they're probably going to supply more advanced capabilities to Pakistan in the future to shore things up.
Any other countries likely to get involved in helping Pakistan improve its air defense?
The analysis points to Turkey as likely to deepen cooperation. And it mentions the possibility of maybe some European technical assistance as well.
And there are wider regional implications, too.
There are. The source notes that these more advanced capabilities China develops, partly spurred by this, might also end up being deployed by China against India along the Sino-Indian border or in the Tibetan Autonomous Region.
So improvements driven by the Pakistan situation could show up elsewhere.
That's the potential scenario outlined in the source.
So despite the performance issues seen in Operation Sindoor.
Right. Despite those observed shortcomings, the source finishes this section with a clear prediction. Pakistan's air defense system, driven by these lessons learned and the anticipated help from outside, is bound to improve.
Bound to improve. Okay, so let's try and summarize. What does this deep dive really reveal for you, the listener?
Well, we've navigated through this pretty complex, layered world of air defense, haven't we? We've looked at the different technologies, the strategic thinking, the command structures in both India and Pakistan.
All viewed through the lens of this specific analysis we've been discussing.
Exactly.
And the core takeaway, coming straight from the source's perspective, seems to be that effective air defense is, well, it's much more than just having fancy missiles, isn't it?
Far more. It's about how well those layers are integrated, how effective the coordination is, the technological capability, obviously, and how real-world events like this Operation Sindor act as these really unforgiving stress tests.
They expose what works.
And what doesn't, the
Yeah.
capabilities and the critical vulnerabilities. And that inevitably drives future development, future spending. And that leaves us with maybe a final thought to chew on, something drawn from the source's own look ahead.
Go for it.
Well, considering how Operation Sindor seems to have really highlighted the vital importance of integrated multi-layered air defense,
Right.
and given the source's prediction that Pakistan's capabilities are bound to improve, probably with help from China and maybe others,
Yeah.
what might that landscape, the whole picture of air superiority, look like in this really critical region in just a few years? And maybe how crucial will that level of integration, or maybe the continuing lack of integration of all these complex systems, be in defining what that future actually looks like?